Uh-oh, we caught the liberals, and all it took was cannabis. Imagine that. I'll explain in a minute, but welcome to the first sip on Bakes on Things. We need to talk about something. Something that should be very simple in this country. Numbers. Basic arithmetic. The kind of math a grade 5 student with a broken pencil and a melted eraser they've been chewing on for weeks could still get right. But somehow, liberal governments, year after year, decade after decade, budget after budget, promise after promise, manage to get the numbers wrong every single time. And not just a little wrong, not oopsie, a rounding error wrong. No, I am talking about spectacularly, embarrassingly, nation damagingly, stupefyingly wrong. And funny enough, these mistakes never seem to just happen to land in the taxpayers' favor. Have you ever noticed that? They never result in more revenue than expected, lower spending than forecasted, or a smaller deficit than projected. No, 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 no. Under liberal governments, the math is almost always wrong in one direction. And guess who loses every single time? Let's go.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
It's starting to smell like a whole bunch of horse crap in the Carn barn. But in fairness to Mark Carney, it's not just him. This is years of liberal rule and mistakes. This is years and decades of liberal prime ministers. But we're going to start with former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Let's take the heat off of Mark for a second. Let's start with the cannabis legalization numbers because this one just came out and this one is almost poetic. Justin Trudeau rode cannabis legalization straight into power in 2015. It was the brightest, shiny object on his campaign shelf. He promised it would generate nearly $750 million in tax revenue in the first 5 years of cannabis legalization. They told Canadians this would be the jackpot, that the government would make so much money that drug education programs would expand, addiction awareness campaigns would be amplified, and Canada would become some sort of model of enlightening social policy around the world. And what has happened? Well, the tax revenue came in more than $100 million short of what they projected. And Health Canada's promised spending on education didn't just fall short, it evaporated. One of the only things the Liberals actually managed to implement, which was the legalization of cannabis, ended up being yet another financial miscalculation on the Liberal part. And while they shrug it off, oh well, we missed it by 100 million. Canadians pay for that. Because think about this. If they can't correctly estimate the revenue from something that's under $1 billion, why would any of us believe that their numbers on Ukraine are correct? Or the projected deficit of only 78 billion? And I still can't believe that we've reached a point in our history in this country where 78 billion is in red ink is described with the word only, but here we go. These are the same people who miscounted everything from refugee settlement costs to infrastructure spending, to carbon tax impacts, to housing affordability programs, to the cost of the infamous ArriveCAN disaster. Every time the numbers come out with the Liberals, the real total is higher, the burden is heavier, and the outcome is worse than promised. Let me ask you something, and think about this seriously. Do you remember when they said the carbon tax would be revenue neutral and it wasn't? Do you remember when they said the federal debt would never exceed 600 billion and it blew right past a trillion? Do you remember when they said deficits would be modest, short term, and gone by 2019? Well, not only did the deficits never disappear, they grew. And now we pay more than $80 billion a year just to service the government's debt. That's right. Before we build a road, fund a hospital, pay a nurse, repair a naval ship, or train a single doctor, Canadians now fork over more than the government ever brought in from cannabis, or the carbon tax, or the luxury taxes, or their endless boutique fees, just to cover the interest on their mistakes. But here's a question the mainstream media is refusing to ask about all of this. Journalists don't ask it, so we are. Why are the Liberals' numbers never wrong in the taxpayers' favor? Why don't they ever underestimate revenue? Why don't they ever overestimate program savings? Why don't we ever find out that a project costs less than they projected? Why don't we ever end up with more money than they expected? Why, after a decade of miscalculations, do the miscalculation results always seem to harm Canadians and never help us? This is a big question because you would think, just by statistical accident, there would be at least one example where the Liberals lowballed the benefits and Canadians got more than was promised. But go ahead, I'll wait. Try to find one. Try to find that magical unicorn Liberal projection that actually exceeded their financial and fiscal expectations. You won't. And if you can't find a win anywhere, not in housing, not in immigration cost estimates, not in defense procurement, not in green energy rebates, not in emissions targets, not in deficits, not in debt, then at some point, we all have to start asking questions. We need to stop calling it incompetence and start asking whether it's actually intentional that it's never in our favor. Because if Canadians are always the ones losing, someone must be winning, right? And if someone is winning, then we should be asking who, and we should be asking why. And we should absolutely be investigating how decade-long miscalculations always end up benefiting the government, bloating bureaucracy, enriching consultants, feeding crown corporations, and strengthening political power while weakening the public that pays for it. Why? The math isn't broken, my friends. The calculator isn't dying. The batteries aren't drained. The only people being drained are you and I. Regular Canadians, drained financially, drained emotionally now, drained of trust, drained of patience with this government. So here's the real question. How many times do the Liberals need to get the math wrong before Canadians finally say this must be audited? Somebody needs to dig in and examine this and expose it. How many billions have to disappear before someone demands some accountability here? How many projections have to collapse before someone asks whether the error is the feature and not the bug? Because if there are no wins, and there aren't any that I could find, if there are no positive surprises, and there aren't any that I could find, if the numbers are always wrong and always against the public when they're wrong, then the conclusion has to be simple here. It's not that the Liberals can't do the math. It's that the Liberals never intended for the math to work for you in the first place. It's something to think about on your Wednesday. And I want you to join the conversation down below. And I want you to talk about any of these projects where you have seen we actually lost. I mentioned a few in this episode, but there are so many more. And that's a scary, scary thought. And if you're a Liberal supporter and you want to dig around and see if you can find any type of policy they have ever introduced where we actually came out ahead of their projections, I invite you to put those in the comments as well. Something stinky is really going on here. We joke about the Carn barn, we joke about all these different things, and we have some fun with it. We should, because otherwise we're all going to cry. But the reality is we have a problem in this country. And the media won't expose it. That's the other problem. The media won't expose that nobody ever talks about the projections the Liberals making that never end up in a taxpayer's favor. Ever. It's not just one or two mathematical mistakes. They often get the deficits wrong. They often get projections on what they're spending wrong. And we all shrug it off. But in the aggregate, when you put it all together, there's nothing here that should be shrugged off. They're hoping we shrug it off. Because what happens is you get a list of 10, 20, 30 Liberal mistakes, 30 calculation mistakes in the last decade. And every single one of those calculations went against the Canadian citizen. Not one went for us. Not one program has benefited us more than they thought. They've only ever come up short. under liberal governments? That's a scary, scary aspect of what's going on in this country, and nobody's asking questions about it. Nobody. That needs to be asked right now. Thanks for watching Bakes on Things, the first sip. I hope you have a good Wednesday. I know I started it with a stressful topic, but hey, you know what? We have to be talking about this. We'll see you again at 2:45 for the last word today. Have yourselves a wonderful Wednesday wherever you are. Thanks for living and listening, and we will see you this afternoon.